Pleasure to be back, Mike. How are you?
Very well indeed. I mean, I've got to say, I agree with Donald Trump here. I mean, this is another one of these ridiculous cases that's been brought against him. Stormy Daniels was here being interviewed by Piers Morgan many, many months ago, and she gave some rather graphic details of what she will say, I dare say, in this particular court case. But what do you make of it?
I think it's ridiculous, Michael. I mean, and that's not just me. I'm not a legal analyst, but there are many legal analysts here in the United States, respected, even those who are not a fan of Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form, who say that this case never should have gotten even to this point. I mean, we're talking about hush money payments that were made many years ago, allegedly, to a porn star in essence, and now you're going to criminally try to charge a former president in a Manhattan courtroom. It's the complete and total weaponization of the justice system. Donald Trump is right in terms of that this reveals, or it seems that we're in a third world country at this point. And it seems also at this point that Joe Biden, if he is the nominee against Donald Trump, who most certainly will be the nominee, on things like inflation, voters think Trump is the better guy to handle that. They think he's the better guy to handle gas prices and energy and trade and the border, obviously, and immigration, which is a huge, huge issue here. So on all the major issues, Trump is leading. In all the swing states, Trump is leading. If the election were held right now, he would win in an electoral landslide. And it seems that the only way that he could be taken out is not at the ballot box, not by voters, but by lawyers and judges in cases like this, where anybody looks at it and says, wait, criminal behavior over something like this? No, I don't think so.
Well, that's the thing I think that puzzles a lot of people in this country, Joe, because we're sort of struggling to see this as some kind of criminal act. Because, of course, you can understand why there are civil cases. You can understand why even, district attorneys might get a little hot under the collar because they don't like somebody's politics. But what is the actual charge here? I mean, what exactly do they think that he's done wrong, and what crime has he committed?
Ironically, Michael, it is election interference. In other words, by keeping these payments silent, the American voters did not know in 2016 that Donald Trump had engaged, allegedly again, in this act. Right. And therefore, he interfered with his own election, an election that he won in 2016. The irony, of course, is that this is actual election interference, where you have the front runner in terms of the nomination and to win the presidency in court seemingly every other day, right, trying to at least put a face on these cases to say, look what they're trying to do to the 45th president of this country. Another irony, by the way, Michael, is that every time he appears in court, his numbers seem to go up even more. So go figure. But there's another case going on down in Atlanta that's going very well for Donald Trump right now. Right. That I do know. And what about the significance of the March trial date? Because that's right in the middle of sort of primary season, isn't it? Sure. March 25th is just a day or two before several states here in the U.S. will hold their primaries. Now, of course, Donald Trump by that point may be the only candidate left, because he faces Nikki Haley in South Carolina. That is her home state where she served as governor. And he's leading by, I guess, touchdowns probably isn't a good analogy to use with the British audience, so I'll just go with points. 30 points, 35 points there. And Nikki Haley probably will drop out after that race, because if you lose that big in your home state, then that's the end for you. So it won't have so much of an impact on the primary season. It could have an impact in the general election, because polls show now, Michael, that if Donald Trump is actually convicted of a crime, then enough people may not vote for him or stay home to swing the election over to Joe Biden in those key swing states where it comes down to a couple thousand votes.
But of course, as we discussed the other day, it may well come down to the fact that Biden isn't actually standing, mightn't it? Because although the one thing that is in his favour at the moment is the economy, because he's one of the few leaders of a world economy who can say actually that there's a bit of growth going on, more than about 1%, which is what we're suffering from. But he is becoming more and more the target of other Democrats. Even Hillary Clinton, I saw the other day, threw in her 2 pennies worth to say that, they're all a bit worried about his cognitive abilities.
And they should be, right? I mean, in just 1 week, one week last week alone, Michael, he said he had a conversation with Francois Mitterrand, the French president, who didn't die like a couple of months ago or last year. Right. We're talking nearly 30 years ago. Yeah. Then he said that he had a conversation with Helmut Kohl, the German chancellor, who died many years ago. You half expected him to start talking about a Zoom call that he had with Charles de Gaulle. right? Because that's where things are going at
Right.
this point. And then that Robert Hur special counsel report comes out, and what they revealed was that he couldn't remember when he was even vice president. That
Right.
lasted 8 years. That's not like, hey, pick a day a couple of years ago when you were doing this. It was literally 2 terms that he couldn't remember when he started or when he finished. Couldn't remember when his son had died. Not even close in terms of that year. And then an ABC News poll comes out, Michael. 86% of Americans believe that this president should not serve another term because he does not have the mental fitness to do so. Imagine that. Nearly 9 in
Right.
10 people say, no thanks, Joe Biden, you don't get a sequel. But the question is then, does Donald Trump get convicted? And then what happens from there with all these third-party candidates?
Right.
It's nuts.
Maybe they should just give it to Taylor Swift, Joe, because apparently 1 in 20 people in the US believe that Taylor Swift is, in fact, part of some kind of conspiracy regarding Joe Biden.
It's the most ridiculous conspiracy I've heard in a time where we have many conspiracies going on. So we're supposed to believe that somehow magic powers allowed the Kansas City Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, and Travis Kelce, the tight end for the Chiefs, started dating Taylor Swift. So then they, after they win the Super Bowl, then endorse Joe Biden and bring the presidency home to him. I mean, the Chiefs have won, 3 Super Bowls in the past decade, so they don't need help from anybody in order to win these championships. They're one of the great teams of all time. And to think that somehow Taylor Swift's involved with all this, it's just dumb. I mean, these
Right.
are adults that are coming to these conclusions, and
I
I'm
know.
certainly not one of them.
Indeed. And also, she hasn't endorsed Biden, and if she's got any brains, as I suggested, she probably won't.
Well, look, Michael Jordan, the great NBA star who played for the Chicago Bulls and won a bunch of championships in his own right, he once said that Republicans buy sneakers too. And what you don't want to do is alienate half of your audience potentially by saying you endorse a president who you may not be fully behind, by the way. Remember, a lot of young people in the United States think that Joe Biden is a war criminal because of his support for Israel. And most Taylor Swift fans, I would imagine, are already, just teenagers, right? Like my daughter, she's 10 years old. She is not eligible to vote. So I don't know how many people, even if Taylor Swift did go ahead and endorse Joe Biden, how many people is that really going to sway in the end? They're going to say, food prices are still too high and gas prices are still too high, and our border is wide open and terrorists are coming into this country, and the world seems like it's on fire in terms of Biden's foreign policy. But because Taylor Swift, who has a great voice and puts on a great show with the Eras Tour, told me to vote for him, I guess I'll do that now. I think people are a little smarter than that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And in fact, I mean, talking of people coming to your shores, I mean, we have a problem with that as well. I mean, we've just now finally been given information, shall we say, that some of the people who are coming here, certainly illegally, are now under investigation by MI6 and the police because they may have links to extremism. And I'm going, oh, really? Well, you didn't think that was the case before you got told that?
And MI6 over across the pond, and then obviously the FBI here finding that hundreds of people have been apprehended trying to cross into our border who are on the FBI terror watch list. And those are the ones that we've apprehended. There's been thousands upon thousands of gotaways that have come into this country. We don't know where they're coming from. Increasingly, we're seeing more and more activity from Middle Eastern countries coming to the United States and into our country illegally, and no one is doing anything to stop it. So that's why it's going to be a number one issue, I think, in this country, especially if, God forbid, a terror attack is carried out and we learn that a terror cell carried this out by crossing into our border, and no one took the problem seriously when they should have.
Exactly right. Joe Concha from Fox News, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. We'll be speaking to you, I'm sure, again very soon.